Good morning, Tallahassee. It's time to wake up Warchant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Here's Warchant.com's Aslan Hajavandi and Corey Clark.
Welcome on in, folks. Thursday edition. Wake up Warchant right here, 97.9 ESPN Radio. I'm Aslan. He is Corey. This show brought to you by For the Table Hospitality. It's going to be a power to the people edition of the program. We're going to do nothing but Renegade Express. Maybe, perhaps, bring in managing editor Ira Schoffel to give us some lowdown on the educational aspect, the scholar part of student athlete or scholar athlete or what have you. But anyhow, before we get to that, though, let's all find out how Corey's doing. Corey, how are you?
I am doing good, buddy. Brady Clark, my 9-year-old son, soon to be 10-year-old, had his last day of school on Wednesday. So he will be a 5th grader the next time he goes into a school, which is pretty insane to think that kid's that close to middle school now.
Wow.
Time flies, my man. Time flies.
You feel old, friend?
Oh, yeah. I feel old every day when I look in the mirror. But these kind of passages of time really make you feel old, too. Sometimes it feels like, man, he can't be 10 years old. He can't be. He's going to be 10 in a month. That's crazy. Because sometimes and then the other times it's like, man, I can barely remember him when he was old. He used to sleep on my chest. He'd fall asleep on my chest when he was like 11 pounds. And that seems like a lifetime ago.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Dad life.
It's fun, man.
Man.
Dad life's pretty cool, man. I knew it was going to be cool, and it's been even cooler and more fun than I ever thought it could be.
Awesome, man. Well, so there's no graduation or anything for him at this point, right?
Not from 4th to 5th. I think they do something for 5th graders at his school where I think they have a celebration day, and then on the last day of school, they all walk through the hallway, and all the other kids and all the other grades line the hallways and cheer for them.
Jeez, like when they're going off to war or something? Come on, man.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's like the tiger walk or the dog walk before a football game.
Oh, fantastic. Maybe we could maybe I'll strap him up with the GoPro, and we can kind of do like a video feature on him that day.
Yeah, that'd be cool. On Warchant, sure. Yeah, people would love that.
Right. There should be a feature on Sam Howell, the number one quarterback that Florida State has kind of targeted and earned the verbal commitment of up on Warchant. I need to probably go and fix it. The audio's all messed up. It's been a bad week for your director of digital media, folks. It's been a bad week, just struggling here in the pocket, but things will get better, I promise. But, we'll have a video feature on him up on the website for your consumption. In case folks wanted to know, we do have a winner. It is official now, Corey. The Greg Jones run did win. Greg Jones run is the most famous running play in Florida State history, according to the fans, the people of Warchant.com and the Tribal Council.
I feel like it makes sense. I think I almost talked myself into it, again, by talking about, Dexter Reed will go down in history, in Florida State history. That's how famous that run was.
Yeah. And right now they're taking nominations. The only way you can do your nominations is by getting on the Tribal Council of Warchant.com. If you're not a member, go ahead, use that Warchant30 promo code, get you some 30 days free on the website. So the next one up right now, Corey, is most famous defensive scoring play. So only nominations right now. And right now it seems like Terrell Buckley, T-Bucks pick 6 in Ann Arbor back in 91. That is the clubhouse sort of leader, I would assume. That the first 4 response to the thread was that play. And then a whole bunch of other people start rattling off Roscoe Parrish getting hit by Stanford Samuels and Peter Boulware sacking Danny Werfel and Reinhard Wilson wreaking havoc on Danny Werfel. And it's guys, gals, it's defensive touchdown. It's not best sack.
You gotta read, kids.
Yeah,
gotta read it all.
Rein it in. What do you think? What stands out to you? Most famous defensive scoring play in Florida State history?
I mean, that's the first one that immediately comes to mind. Is that one? How about the strip sack and fumble that Florida State had in 2009 against Jacksonville State to cement that win over Ryan Perilou in the rain the second week of the season? Is that a big one? Everybody remember that one?
I don't.
Anyone?
Did that really happen? Yeah. I remember the struggle. I remember struggling.
They had to score within the final 2 minutes to take the lead over Jacksonville State. And then I think it was Jacksonville State. It was wherever Ryan Perilou went.
Yes, it was Jacksonville State.
And then Perilou got the ball back, and maybe Jacoby McDaniel had something. I don't remember, but there was a strip sack. Somebody picked it up and ran it in for a touchdown to win the game. I would also say, I know this isn't supposed to be Florida State bloopers, but Matthew Thomas's almost touchdown against Florida this year.
Well,
he dove instead of just running in. He dove. He knocked himself out at the 1 yard line, and then got a celebration penalty on a touchdown that he didn't score.
Yeah.
So good times. I haven't thought of it. I'm sure there are others that would come to mind. You know what? The Geno Hayes against Matt Ryan locked that one up in 2007.
Yeah.
That was kind of I know it wasn't a good team, but that was a pretty big play in a pretty big moment. And I'm sure there's countless others. I just can't think of any right now. I will, though. Give me time.
I guess that's the thing, right? This is what's bizarre to me is that this university and its athletic program, its football program with this illustrious history, the most famous running play is, it was an awesome athletic feat, display of brute force, but it's like Greg Jones knocking some guy's head off in 2003. That's the most famous run in the program's history. We're talking about defensive touchdowns. It was, I guess that's actually a big deal. That was a turning point in the entire program, right? Putting him on the map.
Yeah, that was a big game. That was 1 versus 3. That was a huge stage for that. And it was like the fourth play of the game. It was the first drive of the game. I think it was like the fourth play of the game. So yeah, that kind of set the tone for the whole game. But man, I'm sure there's plenty. I'm having a hard time thinking of I know Dion had a couple. Terrell Buckley had like 4 or 5. He had one against Virginia Tech in 1990. When they were behind, and that was before Virginia Tech became Virginia Tech, where it was one of the better interception returns you'll ever see. He started high-stepping at the 25, but it was with defenders in front of him. You don't really see guys high-step and then have to make some moves and cut back all the way across the field. It was a really cool play. Terrell Buckley, man, he wasn't as good as Dion. He wasn't the shutdown corner that Dion was. He wasn't as tall or as fast, so that didn't help. But man, was he an exciting college football player! Just an unbelievable college football player.
All right, fantastic. Yeah, I don't want to nominate anything because my frame of reference is so narrow. It's only over the last 20 years, 25 years, so I have a vivid memory of things. So I don't want to be the guy involved in it. I see people talking about Mario Edwards scoop and score against Clemson.
That was a good one. It was a 54-7 game.
No one outside of Tallahassee talks about that touchdown play. You know what I'm saying? If that's the most, no one talks about that play outside of Tallahassee and Clemson. Nobody is sitting at a bar in Moline, Illinois, man, that was a great play right there. But remember that play that Florida State made that 1 year? No one's talking about that play.
Tell me the most famous defensive play and defensive touchdown in Michigan history, or Penn State history, or Alabama or Florida. That's hard to do.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? I think it's got to be within the confines of famous for Florida State fans, because otherwise. Other than a couple of plays, I think the Benjamin catch, I think the Warwick Charlie Ward to Warwick Dunn, those are the punt Ruski. Those are plays that live on across the country.
Yeah.
But otherwise, you're kind of looking at all this stuff in a vacuum. I can't tell you the most famous running play in Florida history. I'm sure there is one. I assume Tebow getting the first down and then doing the Gator chomp.
Why would you want to use valuable real estate in that fantastic mind of yours to remember something from that place?
Exactly right, man. It's all
all right.
With the other stuff.
On to the questions. The Renegade Express. Hop aboard, everybody. Let's go. FSU guy 1989. Sup, dudes? A quick take from my last question from last week. I will not root for Florida no matter what, even when they play Miami. Florida is the worst school and the most disgusting town in the visible universe, bar none. He asked us whether or not folks would root for Florida to beat Jimbo. And I was like, no, surely people won't. But then you gave the perspective of that crazy fan that probably will. There's some folks out there, right? There's that segment of Florida State fans that honestly hates Florida more than they love Florida State. And there's probably a weird sort of faction sect now of Florida State fans that are so anti-Jimbo. They probably would rather see, A&M go 0-12 than see Florida State go 14-0.
Like I said back then, I think if the stakes are even for each team, I think everybody would root for Florida to lose. If they're playing for the national championship, I think people, as much as it would pain them, would root for Jimbo as opposed to Florida winning another one. But if Florida would have a chance to knock Texas A&M out of the conference championship race or to knock them from the playoffs, I think there's a good faction of Florida State fans that would root for Florida to do that, to keep Texas A&M from winning. From winning something of note, which they haven't done in 78 years.
Boom,
so
roasted.
I think that's something. I think that's where it comes in. I think if everything being equal, almost 100% of Florida State fans root for Texas A&M. But if Florida can kind of throw a wrench into things and knock off Texas A&M when they're going for a perfect season or something, and Florida's not really playing for anything, Man, I think there's a good faction that would root for Florida to beat Jimbo.
That's bizarre, man. The guy who gave you a national title. Good Lord. Anyhow,
I wonder if you flipped it. If Ohio State was playing Florida State in a bowl game, who do you think Florida fans cheer for?
If Ohio State was playing Florida State in a bowl game, they still would cheer for Ohio State. They'd cheer for Urban Meyer before they would cheer for Florida State.
Man, they loathe Urban Meyer.
I know, but that's a temporary thing in their history. Florida State is internal. The hate is always going to be there. Same thing for us in Florida.
Do you think if it was the same scenario, and it would be hard to do because they're not in the same conference like Florida and Texas A&M, but if Ohio State had a chance to keep, or if Florida State had a chance to keep Ohio State from doing something special, in Florida State, there was nothing really on the line for Florida State except pride. You don't think a strong faction of Florida fans would root for Urban Meyer to lose?
I don't know.
Florida State?
I only have one. I've only associated with one person who went to the University of Florida, so I don't know a lot of those people.
Point. How can you get in that mindset?
Exactly. I would think not, though, but who knows? Nothing they do down there makes sense, so it could totally boggle the mind. FSU Guy 1989 also asked, in reference to records that will never be broken, he thinks the streak of top 5 finishes in college football that Florida State had with 14 years in the top 5 will stand the test of time. Even Bama has only done 7 under, I think, Saban's watch, perhaps. So we want to get our take on that. Is he crazy in thinking that's the record that would stand the test of time? I don't think so. I mean, shoot, if Saban can't do it, then I don't know. In this modern era of college football and parity and everything, it's hard to see it getting snapped. Unless we go to the time where Power 5 is the only football around, and that way there's probably going to be – actually, no, because that way there's going to be more talent spread out. I mean, the talent's still going to get, that much further thinned out or concentrated between a couple of schools. Actually, I just didn't make any sense there. Fix me, Corey.
Yeah, no, I kind of lost you there for a second, man. I actually started looking at a text. I'm just kidding. I don't get texts this early in the morning, Aslan. You know that. No, man, I think that I would have said, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, I'd have said, yeah, there's no chance that anybody could ever do that again. But, man, Alabama's halfway there, and that train doesn't appear to be slowing down anytime soon. So if he coaches another 5 years, I'm just going to pencil them in for being in the top 5 those 5 years. And so then you're at 12. And so I don't think it's as nearly unattainable as I thought it was 10 years ago because of what Saban's built there. And whoever takes over for him, they won't be Nick Saban, but they're going to have a machine at the ready where they could even be Larry Coker and keep it running for a couple of years before it falls off a cliff. So, I mean, I think Alabama does have a chance. If they're at 7 now, which I think that's what he said, and I assume that's I don't remember them not finishing in the top 5 anytime recently. So it could happen. I don't think it's unattainable like Mike Martin's wins record.
Oh, man, you're probably right, but I really hope you're wrong. They've got plenty to enjoy in Tuscaloosa. They don't need to come in and pillage other people's records. But anyhow, let's take a break. We'll be right back. 97.9 ESPN Radio's Wake Up War Chant.
You're locked in to Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Hey, welcome back. It's Wake Up War Chant, Renegade Express time. Your questions, your content, we try to provide the answers. This show brought to you by For the Table Hospitality. It's 97.9 ESPN Radio. So we talked about it, I think, on Monday. We identified the guy that had the great Jimbo-esque message. It was Heisman 20. So really, nice little golf clap. Let's give him that real quick. The question he asks us is, what's the craziest non-football thing you saw at a Florida State game, Corey? For him, it was about 8 to 9 years ago, seeing the Burger King man running across Bowden Field, getting chased by police jumping in the crowd who helped him escape, only for the man to be arrested later inside the stadium. TPD did not let him have it his way.
People, y'all, you need to go to – I wasn't at that game. I wasn't covering Florida State at the time, so it must have been 05 or 06. But, folks, go to YouTube because I've seen it on YouTube. I assume it's still there. And go type in whatever you have to type in, Burger King, Florida State, football field, Burger King, FSU football, and watch that because it is the funniest. It's one of the funniest things you'll ever see. That dude runs 100 yards just in the middle of a TV timeout with the Burger King mask on, creepy as hell, running. I think there's music set to it, and then the cops start chasing him. He hops over the brick into the student section. They pull him up, and then as he's walking up, the cops are waiting for him at the top of the aisle. So, he doesn't end up getting away with it, but it is really funny.
I see it. It says it was homecoming game Maryland 2005. I think I was there. I'm pretty sure I was there.
There you go.
I was there. So, Yeah, nothing else stands out in terms of the craziest thing I've seen non-football wise. I've never seen a fight. Did I see a fight? No, I didn't see a fight. I don't think I've ever seen a fight in the stands. Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything too crazy at a Florida State game that's not football related.
I saw a fight outside the Orange Bowl. I think it was the 96 game. And a father and son were involved. It was like 8 guys just getting after it in the middle of the street. And I looked like a father. Yeah, it was a father and son because I remember the guy. There was Florida State fans and Miami fans. And the Florida State guy, he's like, "Dad, are you okay?" after it was over.
Oh.
Which, I mean, it's kind of rough to see. I was 21 at the time, but I mean, I guess that's prime fighting age. But it just kind of made my skin crawl. It's like, dude, don't get your dad in a fight. Hey, you know what I mean? Like however it escalated up to that point, and all the testosterone, and I know people can be complete jack blanks, but you don't have to you don't have to get in a fight and get your older side of your 55, 60-year-old dad involved in the middle of the street in Miami. So that was crazy. I can't think of anything funny off the top of my head, but I'm sure I've seen some stuff.
Sure, man. The family that brawls together, balls together. I don't know what Corey's talking about. I'd love to get into a fight with my dad. Well, not with my dad, but alongside my dad. As long as we won, that'd be great. That'd be the best bonding experience ever.
It didn't feel like they won.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
The dad looked a little worse for wear.
All right, never mind. Corey, the voice of reason always. Next question, Naples Knoll 88 asks, can either of you take a stab at how much extra money the ACC Network will mean to Florida State? Do you think it could be the difference between a standalone football operations facility like Taggart wants and the alternative of renovating more, Aslan, of renovating more? For this, we cheated. Went to the boss man himself. We went to Gene Williams, our founder and administrator of warchant.com. He provided the following answer for me to pass on to you folks. Nobody really knows, he says, how much additional revenue this linear network will mean for the conference. At a board of trustees meeting last year, athletics director Stan Wilcox said that he was expecting about $8 to $10 million of the first year that the network would be up and running, and then 10 to 15 in subsequent years. But those are just projections, and the people that Gene spoke to that are knowledgeable when it comes to revenue and television metrics say that those were wildly optimistic. And since then, it sounds like Wilcox has backed off. Anyhow, with cord cutting, satellite and cable providers cutting back on sports networks, just think, Comcast is limiting who they're giving the Big Ten network to. It's possible that this linear network that the ACC is launching won't move the financial needle. Nobody outside the commissioner think it's going to be a big boon. So at the end of the day, it's unlikely that the revenue will have a major impact on projects like the football-only facility. Maybe $1 million or $2 million, which is helpful, but hardly a game changer, he says.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I talked about that ad nauseum about the bubble bursting.
Yeah.
And whatever they thought the ACC network was going to bring in, it won't be anywhere close to that by the time reality sets in. It'll still be a moneymaker, I assume, but it'll be, kind of a drop in the bucket. It'll be a small portion of the bucket that they were expecting.
Right. They're still getting most of their money from the network deals, not their actual only network, but the whether you're the Big Ten, you're getting the money from Fox so Fox can air your games, or ESPN's given to the ACC and the SEC. That's where the lion's share of the money's coming from. I saw an article in the LA Times that said that last year, the SEC network and Big Ten network were expected to get between $10 to $8 million per school. That was for 2017. Meanwhile, the Pac-12 network was only going to get $2 to $3 million. So probably
per school.
Yes, per school. So
it's probably somewhere in there.
Yeah.
In the gray area in between those two conferences is where the ACC will be. Yeah. So no, that would when you're looking at money like that, there's no chance that makes any kind of dent as far as a standalone football facility.
Right. Next question, Bollie 6589 or Bollie, Bollie. How would you pronounce that, Corey? Bollie.
I would pronounce it Bollie because if you took the B off, it would be Ollie.
There you go.
So if you add the B, I just assume you call it Bollie.
Logistic master right there. Sup, guys? I'm from Chicago, but now living in Madison, Mississippi. Hey, represent.
Oh, boy.
Represent. No, Madison's beautiful, Corey. If you're going to end up anywhere in Mississippi, live in Madison. It's beautiful. Brick buildings everywhere. It's nice. Very upper crust.
Say no more.
Found
a brick.
Found the podcast a week ago, and I've been listening to all your past shows because they're great, but also because Mississippi Sports Talk Radio sucks. Aslan, any recommendations for sports talk outside of the SEC here? Also love the music selections. Keep up the great work, guys. No, man, there's only ESPN 105.9 in Jackson, for all I know, that has sports talk. That's the only station I know, and they're totally SEC-centric. Bo Bounds is their their Paul Feinbaum, if you will, but he's on in the mornings. My guy John Wiener does a show every now and then. He fills in for Bo. So if you ever see John Wiener filling in for Bo, give a listen in. He's an SEC homer, but he's a little less over the top with things. But yeah, man, you're amongst them now. Just assimilate, or just hope that Florida State becomes awesome again and you can talk smack like I was able to. See, I lived there when Florida State was on the rise, so it was fantastic. Everyone had to kind of like bow down and kiss the ring, so it was a good feeling. But right now that's not the case, but hopefully Willie will get us there sooner rather than later. Now his question, he says, Corey, who do you guys think we have tried to schedule at home and home with but was scared to play us and turned it down? What's the chances of getting one with Ohio State since they seem open to play good teams home and away?
I get the impression that over the last 8 years, Florida State hasn't tried to do any home and homes with big-time programs. I don't think that was Jimbo's philosophy. I don't think that's what he wanted, which, correctly or incorrectly, I mean, it worked out. He won a lot of games and didn't really have to go – he never had to go play at, Ohio. You remember, like his first year, they had to go play at Oklahoma, his second game of the season. And then the very next season, Oklahoma's number one in the country coming to him. Well, that's 2 losses right there. And he's like, well, what do we do that for? And the Oklahoma loss in 11 just started a downward death spiral. So where they're losing to Wake Forest 2 weeks later. So, man, I don't think that they've tried that in recent years. That's obviously how Florida State built its name. Well, no, they didn't build their name on home and home when Bowden first started. It was just away games.
Yeah.
Nebraska never came back. Ohio State never came back. Notre Dame didn't come back for 15 years. So they built their reputation on just going on the road and beating teams. But I mean, LSU would be kind of cool to me. And they did that back in the early 90s. But I don't think Jimbo tried that at all. I don't think they've tried any of those in recent years because I don't think that's Jimbo's philosophy. He doesn't. I guess he didn't mind the neutral site games necessarily to still open the season, but he didn't want to do a home and home with like Ole Miss or Alabama because then that's costing him a home game and an easy win.
And you're not getting the check that you're going to get from the city of Atlanta or the Chick-fil-A, committee to come out there and do those, neutral site games, or I'm sure whatever Jacksonville's working up. So, yeah, I agree with Corey. It just seems like that financially, everything's about dollars. I mean, you need to have your strength of schedule. I think Florida State probably feels pretty good about having Clemson, Florida, and Miami on the schedule every year, and then Notre Dame rotating in every so often, that they're going to have enough quality win opportunities that they don't need to schedule anything too crazy with home and homes and then, end up on the road and get, ditched out bad. So why not just do a payday? Like what, West Virginia they're going to do in a few years or Boise or whatever. They're going to do Boise.
Yeah, so. Boise, West Virginia. Yeah, but those are neutral sites. Exactly. They're one-offs, essentially. I mean, Boise State, I guess, theoretically still they're planning to travel to it's on the schedule that they would go to Boise the following year, but I just that would be crazy if that happened.
Yeah, we'll see.
But yeah, I remember Jimbo at one of the ACC kickoffs. Might have been his first year on the job when it was announced that they had another home and home with South Florida, and he was irate about it. He did not want to do it at all. Didn't want to play it. Thought it was dumb. Did not like the AD that scheduled it. Said as much. It was all recorders weren't running, but tape recorders weren't running. But he was infuriated that they had to play South Florida at home and home, which is, it's true. You're Florida State, man. If South Florida wants to play you, they come to your place and that's it. You don't go to South Florida. I know it ended up working out as essentially a neutral site game because there were so many Florida State fans at that game and whenever that was, 2012. But Florida State, you don't schedule like that when you're Florida State, man. You don't schedule a home and home with teams you really have nothing to gain by beating. But he's right. It would be cool to see them play Ohio State or an LSU or Georgia, somebody like that. But it's just, I don't know that that's the market anymore.
The Sod Cemetery, Osceola and Renegade, and of course, the War Chant. These are great traditions known to all Seminole fans. If you are a card-carrying, garnet and gold-wearing Nole, don't you deserve a site that is truly dedicated to covering FSU sports? Warchant.com's staff has over 50 years of experience covering the Seminoles. Warchant.com is the only FSU outlet with a full-time recruiting analyst in Tallahassee. Plus, it's the only site with a full-time videographer and a daily podcast, 100% dedicated to FSU sports. Why act like Gators and settle for second best? Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.
Hey, welcome back. I'm Aslan. He's Corey. It's Wake Up Warchant, 97.9 ESPN Radio in Tallahassee, brought to you by For the Table Hospitality. All right, so we did the mailbag, if you will, of Renegade Express questions. We'll do all the callers tomorrow. It turns out we got too many, Corey. Sorry. We're just too popular these days. We got over 10 calls. So
we're double digits now?
Yeah, man. Or 10 voicemails, rather. Yeah.
Now, hopefully, here's what my hope is, Aslan, is that we'll get popular enough where there's no chance we could play them all. So you just take the best ones. That way, I think it'll also make the callers better, knowing that if they don't bring a good question or some insightful commentary, they're not going to make the air. Right now, it's just as long as they call in, they're going to make it. So we gotta get to a point where we're getting 100, 200, 600 voicemails left, and then you have to rifle through them all, or one of our interns, and they can determine which ones actually make the air.
I was about to say, man, I know I'm not a father, but like I'd like to have a life. I don't want to have to sift through 49 voicemails and whittle it down to 10. You know,
that's the game, baby. Yeah. That's the game. That's what happens when you're wildly popular like we are.
Capitalism at its finest, right? Breeding competition. Competition brings out the best for the marketplace. Iron sharpens iron. Any more cliches?
All that stuff.
Yeah.
All that stuff you just said.
Yeah, fantastic, man. So, yeah, keep it calling. I think I actually posted the wrong number on the message board, actually. But I've been giving you folks the right number over the airwaves. Again, it's 850-792-5730. If you want to call, leave a message. We'll get to it on the Friday program. Again, 850-792-5730. And my sarcasm must have been really poorly fonted yesterday on the show because – remember, we were talking about maybe if we could spell this out some way, it would make it interesting for people and be easier to remember instead of all these numbers if we could spell it out. And I was like, oh, maybe we can go by number, and then people can remember it that way. And I said Greg Reed for number 5, and everybody started blowing me up. Like, what are you talking about? What about Jameis Winston, you idiot? I know.
I
remember.
Yeah, who's he?
I remember.
When did Jameis play? A few years ago, I think, right?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
I remember him.
It's too bad because Greg Reed was a really good number 5.
He was.
Greg Reed was the best number 5 in Florida State history. Had to have been. I can't think of another 5 unless Ron Stark was number 5, but I don't think he was. Greg Reed had that number on lock, and then literally he leaves, and probably the best player in school history takes it over, and now he's almost him wearing it is almost an afterthought.
Yeah, like G5, more like J5. Now he's 3. That was
too good.
Yeah, sometimes. Hey, how about this for just a random, awkward, uncomfortable question, Corey? So when the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or Jameis Winston eventually, and I'm saying this obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek, eventually, but if he somehow makes it to the Super Bowl one day, what is the probability that in the lead-up to the Super Bowl there is going to be a big sort of rehash of what he went through at Florida State? Or do you think he's, I don't want to say finally past it, but if he gets to the Super Bowl 4 years from now, will there not be an OTL, an Outside the Lines episode on ESPN, or a non-traditional sports, but news outlet's going to do something about, this nation getting prepared to possibly celebrate a guy winning a Super Bowl who had this, quote, checkered past?
That was always my problem with the coverage with the 2014 season when he was still at Florida State. And Lord knows it would have been the same way in 2015 if he had come back, where every game it would be talked about and people would continue to write stories about it all the time. Like literally once a week, another national publication would write a story about Jameis Winston, the allegations, the way Florida State coddled him, quote unquote, all this stuff. And meanwhile, as soon as he turned pro, like literally as soon as he turned pro, it's like it was washed away. Like when was the last story you remember about that, I don't want to call it a situation, but that drama. When was the last story you remember reading about that or seeing on TV about it? Do you ever remember a broadcaster during a Bucs game bringing it up?
I want to say, I think Tirico brought it up during a game. I want to say he brought it up during a Monday Night Football game. So I somehow think I remember seeing on Twitter like, they had to bring that up there, didn't they? I could be wrong. I mean, otherwise, the only time that I can remember it being brought brought up was, or not even so much during a telecast, but on a national outlet was it 2 years ago or so, whenever that documentary came out, the advocacy piece about what's going on college campuses with sexual assault, and then
there were some
his accuser
there were some wild inaccuracies in that documentary.
It wasn't
not just the Jameis Winston.
It was an advocacy piece. It was something that wanted. It was a Michael Moore film, but it was. I don't want to say it was propaganda, but it was kind of propaganda.
Well, it was a documentary in the sense that it was real people talking, but of course it comes off as
it had an agenda. Everything's got an agenda.
It's one-sided with not all the facts, because some of the facts don't support the narrative, and that's where people get into not trusting. Quite frankly, not trusting the media. And I think Florida State fan, we hear all the nonsensical fake news stuff because that's just what we hear now. But Florida State fans got a taste of that back then. I mean, they really did. They saw how one angle of a story could be portrayed as the truth without any attention being paid to the other side, in inconsistencies and reasons why there weren't charges pressed, or he didn't end up getting arrested. All that stuff was just kind of washed away because the narrative is that Tallahassee police only care about winning football games, and they covered it up to protect their star quarterback, who at that time was the fourth string quarterback, but that was never brought up. Anyway, I don't want to get into all that again, but my point was, it was always odd how when he was a college football player, everybody just wrung their hands about it and talked about how awful it was that he's being coddled and he's allowed to play, and what about
how dare he win the Heisman,
and all that. Yeah, I'm going to vote for Jordan Lynch for the Heisman because I can't vote for Jameis Winston, as if we know if Jordan Lynch is a good person or not. Voting on morality. Meanwhile, as soon as he gets to the pros, again, it all gets washed away. You don't hear about it anymore. And maybe it's because it's a couple years in the rear view. But if somehow he could still be playing at Florida State 6 years later, it would still be brought up almost weekly. But when he got to the pros, it's almost like they just don't care about the off the field stuff anymore. It's always been bizarre to me. It's always been bizarre. Colin Kaepernick was accused of it, of sexual assault by a woman in Miami when he was the quarterback, when he was actually the starting quarterback in San Francisco before all the national anthem stuff. By the way, can we talk about the national anthem for about 10 or 12 minutes?
No, I would love to, but I think we'd get in trouble.
That's a joke.
Was that sarcasm?
I don't want to touch that.
Can we do something, Corey, that it's like you and I, but we don't talk about sports? Like different podcasts, not on this one, obviously. We don't want to, everyone in their virgin ears that doesn't want to hear anything that's not football related. But maybe like once a month, you and I can just get and come up with solutions and make the world great and stuff.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think I want people hearing some of my off the air thoughts.
But back to my point, though, real quick.
I like being liked.
Mike, yeah, you do. You worry about that too much, man. It's over, man. We're not. There's no prom king being handed out after age 18, friend.
True.
Mike Tirico actually brought it up during the Pro Bowl. There's several tweets about Tirico's really got to bring up this rape accusation against Jameis Winston during the Pro Bowl, huh? So yeah, they did bring it up during a game. Yeah,
So one game. I mean, maybe it was brought up more times. I've watched a few Bucs games. I just think all this, when he gets to the NFL, it's all the only thing that mattered was his play on the field. But in college, it was the stuff off the field that mattered more. And I don't quite understand that. Like, if you had a problem with him wearing a Florida State uniform, you should also have a problem with him wearing a Tampa Bay uniform. But it's like the outrage is just completely gone. And it's because he became a pro football player.
What was the height of the nonsense for you? The height of the nonsense for me was it even made PTI during the Boston College game in 2014 during the monsoon when he pushed the referee away because he was trying to go fast. I mean, that was a whole segment on PTI. Like Michael Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser talking about that. This just shows how crazy of a kid he is and has no regard for authority.
There were 1,000 of them. It's hard to even list them in order. I know he was Florida State and Florida DJ Stewart ran into Florida's first baseman in Jacksonville, and they got into a shoving match. And so the Florida State dugout all raced to first base, and so did the Florida dugout. And Jameis Winston's in the middle of it. There are no punches being thrown, but people are pushing and people are grabbing. And literally, I would say 90 seconds later, after we'd all tweeted about it, ESPN called and wanted me to go on air for their 11 o'clock Sports Center to talk about Jameis Winston being in a baseball fight. You know what I mean? Like,
Jeez,
come
really?
on. And I didn't. I would never do that. In
Look at
fact,
you.
I made a point of it during those whole 2 years that I would not go on the radio and talk about it. Because people would call just because they want to get a feet on the ground perspective of the Jameis Winston saga. And so we get calls. Anybody that was on the beat would get calls about going on these national radio shows or these radio shows in other markets to talk about the Jameis Winston saga. And I wasn't going to do it. I wasn't going to be a party to it. And also I thought it was ridiculous and some of it was just completely over the top. But also I'm not comfortable talking about that kind of stuff. And he said, she said, like we talked about yesterday, man. Yeah. It's trivial when you talk about a football aspect when it comes to violent assault allegations. But anyway, so I remember that. I remember when James Ramsey got kicked out of practice, that also made PTI. The one practice that was open in 2014, James Ramsey got kicked out of practice for just unloading on Carlos Williams. I'm sorry. James Ramsey's, he's a lot different personality than Jalen.
A little bit.
Both very good at their sports. So Jalen got kicked out of practice, and PTI turned it into Jimbo was protecting his quarterback and got mad because Jalen knocked Carlos into Jameis Winston's knees. And it's like, man, you don't know what you're talking about. It had nothing to do with Jameis Winston. He got kicked out of a practice because he turned psycho and was he was just going full beast into one of his teammates and trying to knock him over, and did at full speed for no reason other than he was mad because he was Jalen. And so he got kicked out of practice, and then they turned that into Jameis as being coddled. There's 1,000 of them. There was a couple Deadspin articles, more than a few Deadspin articles, actually. There was stories about how local cops also serve as security guards for the game, and isn't that outlandish? The New York Times came down and covered the coaches. Okay, that's it. I found it. I got the winner. The New York Times covered the Jimbo Fisher coaches show and wrote a story about how ridiculous it was that nobody at the coaches show would ever question him on Jameis Winston and why Jameis Winston plays for him at the coaches show.
Right. I remember that. Yeah. The old gray lady. Yeah, it's great.
So that's my winner. They spent all that money to have somebody come down to sit in the audience at a Jimbo Fisher call-in show. Also, obviously having no idea how college football call-in shows work. It's all pandering. And to think that he's going to get hard-hitting questions, and that means that Florida State fans just don't care if their quarterback might have been a sexual assaulter. So that was the height of it. But that was also the same week. Keep in mind, that was the same night that the shooting happened at Strozier Library.
Oh, jeez.
And New York Times wrote a story about the shooting. This isn't a Kill the New York Times segment, but heaven forbid. They wrote a story about the shooting, and in the last paragraph of that shooting, the initial story, Florida State, which has come under scrutiny for its handling of Jameis Winston during sexual assault allegations, they somehow, even at a school shooting at a library where a guy was shot dead by the police in 90 seconds, they somehow figured out a way to mention Jameis Winston in that story.
Don't you miss it, man? I miss it so much.
No, I was so happy. I know I don't speak for Florida State fans when I say this, although I do think I speak for some of them. I was really happy when he decided to go pro, just because the circus and the clown show that followed was just let that go somewhere else. You know what I mean? It got to be where it was impossible to believe some of the stuff that was out there.
The circus, the fun, festive atmosphere, that is the Renegade Express, will continue tomorrow. We'll play your questions that you leave on the voicemail line. Again, 850-792-5730. Go ahead and leave us a message. We'll blow it out tomorrow with all those questions. Corey, you're dismissed. You go ahead. We're going to go to the bullpen. We're going to bring in a heavy hitter, talk about some of the more heavy topics surrounding Florida State right now. We're coming right back on 97.9 ESPN Radio's Wake Up Warchant right after this.
You're locked in to Wake Up Warchant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Time to go to the bullpen, but we're going to bring in like Mariano Rivera, but he doesn't come out to enter Sandman. He comes out to regulators. Welcome back. It's Wake Up Warchant, 97.9 ESPN Radio. I'm Aslan. Corey stepped aside. We're bringing in our managing editor, Ira Schoffel, right now on the program. Ira, thanks for being here, man. How are you doing?
Thanks, man. I always liked Trevor Hoffman's entrance, though.
Okay.
I think that was kind of my guy. Although obviously Mariano Rivera is the man, but I like that little stretch there for Hoffman was pretty intimidating.
It was. All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, just Mo was he's so iconic that when I think of iconic guys when it comes to the beat, man, I'm going to you, man, the source. So you've been busy behind the scenes as always, while Corey and I have all the fun and tap dance like a bunch of freaking morons here on the show. But things going behind the scenes with Florida State are going pretty well. The whole student-athlete holistic approach of Willie Taggart seems to kind of be paying dividends. That was an important part of his recipe, it sounds like, was to come in here and get these kids more involved on the academic aspect. And I know some people might roll their eyes and they want to win football games, but there's a method to the madness. This could probably pay some dividends down the road come fall time.
Well, I mean, I think that's the plan. And you're right. I mean, I think most people – the only time really people talk about academics for a football coach is when he's trying to justify his existence when the team's not doing well. That's usually when a coach yeah, we went 4-8, but man, we're graduating kids. This is what it's all about.
It's the Butch Jones, the Butch Jones Champions of Life talk, right?
Exactly. But I do think it's important because again, if you're taking the right approach, and I think Willie Taggart. I mean, look, and he's talked about it on the record and off the record. And I believe him that, look, he knows that very few of these kids are going to play in the NFL. Even at a school like Florida State, the odds are that they won't play in the NFL. And even if they do play in the NFL, there's a life after football. They might play 3 years, they might play 5 years, they may not play at all. And so you want them to get academic stuff done, get their degree, maybe even get an advanced degree, set their foundation. And then on top of that, there's a lot of life lessons and life skills that are taught by doing your projects, turning in your classwork, going to class, being accountable to your teammates. And I think those are all important. So the fact that he has made it such a priority has really blown away, as I wrote about yesterday on the site, people on the faculty side, people on the administration, people around the program have just been very impressed by what he's done. And I think you're starting to see the fruits of it in that APR that came out yesterday, the 1-year APR. When you look at the multi-year APR, which looks back over 4 years, it still looks bleak. FSU still ranks really poorly in that, but that's because of the 3 previous years. The 1 year that Willie Taggart was here for half of it, they had a tremendous jump and did really well, and I think that could be a sign of the future.
97.9 ESPN Radio is Wake Up Warchant. Ira Schoffel of Warchant.com, managing editor, joining us here on the program. So I guess that's kind of my next question, just how bad were things that Florida State finds themselves kind of in the cellar when it comes to Power 5 programs in terms of football performance in the classroom?
I mean, it's terrible. I mean, as bad as it could be without being being sanctioned by the NCAA. Basically, as long as you stay above a 930 in the multi-year APR, which is what they look over 4 years, as long as you stay over 930, you're okay, but you're flirting with disaster. Once you go below 930, they can start hitting you with sanctions like scholarship reductions, postseason bans, things like that if you don't improve it quickly. And so you don't want to be anywhere close to that. Well, FSU's 1-year APR last year, Jimbo's last full year in Tallahassee, was like 918. I mean, it was below failing. And now they're lucky to the extent that they only look at the 4-year metric to determine punishments. But if they had another really bad year, they could be in real trouble. So I think they were bad. I mean, they were really struggling. And what goes into the APR, it's a pretty, I don't say complicated formula. It's a pretty complex formula. But it takes things into consideration like how many, what percentage of your kids are on track to graduate? Are they making satisfactory progress? How many of your kids stay in school? If they transfer, it's okay. They're still in good standing. Where you get hit, and where FSU's got hit bad a lot the last few years, is they've had kids transfer out or quit football or whatever, but they were doing poorly in school, and you can't make up that difference. That's a big hit. It's actually I think a double whammy in that you lost a kid from your program, and also he was not doing well academically. So there's a lot of pieces to it. It's not just about grade point average. It's to really show the kids are making progress. But, you see other schools. I mean, I'm sure you looked at the database. Anybody can go on the NCAA database. We have a link at warchant.com to it. Alabama's in the 980s. Clemson, I think, was 980 last year. I mean, schools that are winning in football are managing to still do well in the classroom, and FSU just really has fallen behind, and that's what Willie Taggart's trying to catch up.
So the people that you spoke to with this story, I mean, obviously there's hard numbers, there's tangible numbers that we can look at. This is quantifiable, the change that he's made. But in terms of, I don't know, the more the esoteric sort of the feel, the vibe, the culture that we kind of talk about every now and then, Ira, are the folks, the tutors and the academic support folks, do they feel a difference in what they're getting from the football side in terms of leadership and the coaching staff and supporting them?
I mean, 100%. I mean, and I talked to President Thrasher, who, one of his, he's speaking to Greg Beaumont, who's actually oversees all of that on the university side. And he's actually on the university side, but he oversees the academic progress of the student athletes. From what I understand, he told President Thrasher he's just been super impressed by the attendance, the faculty rep for athletics. She said it's just unbelievable how much the kids are not only, going to their classes, but they're being attentive. They're going to tutoring sessions, and it's not just because they like Willie Taggart. I mean, he's holding them accountable, and that's kind of what we talked about, early on. It's a lot of people think because he's kind of a funny guy, a fun guy. One of the things that we touched on and has been written about before, is these early morning sessions where, if one kid misses a class or skips a quiz or whatever it is, his whole group of 10 or 12 players has to show up the next morning and run sprints. And so, nobody wants to make their teammates run sprints. And so those are some of the things they're doing to really make sure the kids are doing what they're supposed to do in the classroom.
And Ira, before we let you go, man, thanks for taking time out. Always do appreciate it. But, I don't want to be accused of putting out misinformation when it comes to things that are relating to Josh Ball and what happened with his code of conduct hearing earlier in the week. But there was a couple of people that are asking questions on Warchant, and I actually responded to them and hope I didn't lead them down the wrong path. But maybe any sort of like light or clarity you can kind of shine in terms of what the ruling was and kind of where things go from here. It was my understanding that, I mean, it said that he was responsible and he suspended effective immediately. That to me sounds like, and by suspended they mean from the university. I mean, I'll talk less. You talk more, and I guess translate it for us with your big, large thinking man's brain.
I mean, from talking to people who've been through the process, I thankfully was not through this process as a student where I went to college. But from what I understand, usually with conduct code violations, things like that, nobody ever in the public ever sees it because of the student privacy laws. This situation we did because the complainant, this female student who said he was violent towards her, she posted it online, so that's how we were able to see it. But once you're found to be responsible by the student conduct committee, then you have, I think it's about 5 days. You have a few days to appeal, and until you appeal and until you go through with that process, you're still a student. So, like, we reported that he had been suspended. From what I understand, the suspension doesn't go into effect until he either declines to appeal or if he appeals and is denied. So over the next few days, he'll either appeal it and they'll rule on his appeal. And generally, that's not going to be, from what I understand, there's very few instances where they find a positive outcome to appeal. Usually, you'd have to prove that the school made some sort of big mistake, or they're going to sustain it. I guess he'll be suspended, or he could choose not to appeal, and then after a few days, I think 5 days, be suspended. So he is going to be suspended. I haven't heard anybody I've talked to say that they expect him to appeal and have that be reversed. So at the end of the day, it is going to be what it is, and I think Josh Ball is not going to be on this team this season.
All right, Ira. Thanks for it, man. Thanks for the knowledge and the clarification. We do appreciate it, man. We're done. Thanks for closing it out for us there, T. Hoffman. That's what Corey would probably call you because that's the only way he knows nicknames. He just uses the initial and it shortens the last name. So
it works.
Yeah.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. That's Ira Schoffel, our managing editor of Warchant.com. That's a wrap on this edition of Wake Up Warchant. Jeff Cameron coming up at 3.
Warchant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. Warchant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WARCHANT30. That's WARCHANT30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WARCHANT30. Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.